Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. 159 million economic impact payments processed. Low-income people and others who aren't required to file tax returns can quickly register for payment with IRS Non-Filers tool. IR 2020-111, June 3rd, 2020. Washington. With 159 million economic impact payments processed, the Internal Revenue Service reminds many low-income Americans who don't usually file tax returns to register for payment by October 15th. So if you don't normally file a tax return, if you know someone that doesn't normally file a tax return, they may still be eligible for the economic impact payment. But if the IRS doesn't know about them, which means they wouldn't have filed the tax return and possibly they're not getting payments from other institutions such as Social Security or some other institution like that where the IRS is working with them and therefore would be aware of them and would still, we would think, hopefully, send out the economic impact payment. If, however, they're not filing and they're not getting benefits from government benefits that the IRS would be working with, they may still want to register for the economic impact payment. There's a link to that tool here, and they have a deadline now of the October 15th. Back to the text. Millions of low-income people and others who aren't required to file a tax return may be eligible for an economic impact payment and can easily register for a payment by using the free non-filers tool. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description. Available only on IRS.gov. Quote, IRS employees worked around the clock to deliver the economic impact payments and new tools to help taxpayers in record time, end quote, said IRS Commissioner Chuck Reddick. Quote, even with these unprecedented steps, there remain people eligible for these payments who need to take action. Registering to receive the payments is easy, and millions of non-filers have already taken this step. We urge everyone to share this information widely to help more people receive these payments, end quote. In the past 2 months, more than 159 million Americans have received economic impact payments totaling almost $267 billion. Of the payments, 120 million were sent to Americans by direct deposit, 35 million by check, and 4 million payments were made in the form of prepaid debit card. This includes payments sent to those who usually do not have to file tax returns, but receive retirement, survivor, or disability benefits under various programs administered by the Social Security Administration, as well as the Department of Veterans Affairs and Railroad Retirement Board, who qualify. So in other words, if you didn't file the tax return and you're getting some kind of economic impact or some type of non-economic impact, some type of payment from government institutions such as these, the IRS still should have processed the payment and been able to send out the payment based on that information. If that's not the case, then you might want to use the tool to give them the information in order to receive the payment at this time. Back to the text. These individuals can use Get My Payment to check their payment status. So if you have any questions about the payment status, whether you filed the tax return or have not filed the tax return, especially if you're in one of these areas where you're getting payments from something other, like you didn't file a tax return, but you're getting some kind of payments like Social Security benefits or something, and you're depending on the IRS to be able to figure that out with the Social Security benefits and still send out the payment, then you might want to go to the Get My Payment tool and check up on that. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description. Non-filers tools on IRS.gov help millions. Special feature remains available through October 15th. So you got the deadline now, October 15th, for the tool. To help people who aren't normally required to file a tax return, the IRS created Non-Filers tool. There's a link to that here. Available in English and Spanish in partnership with the Free File Alliance. The Non-Filers tool is designed for people with income typically below $24,400 for married couples and $12,200 for singles. This includes couples and individuals who are homeless. People can qualify even if they do not have earned income or work. So even if you don't have any earned income, which means, of course, you wouldn't be filing the tax return in that case, or you wouldn't typically need to at that point because it's an income tax return typically, so could still qualify for the economic impact payment. And because no tax return was filed, of course, that means the IRS may not have the information if you're not getting payments from some other kind of government institution that the IRS was working with. Back to the text. Usually, married couples qualify to receive a $2,400 payment, while others normally qualify to get $1,200. So the normal payment, $1,200. If you have two people, if they're married, of course, then you're going to get twice that. So it's basically tied to the individual, typically. Back to the text. People with qualifying children under 17 can get up to an additional $500 for each child. So the child then, of course, if it's a qualifying child, that the key is typically qualifying child, which means in part under the age of 17, then they have the $500 they could get for the qualifying child. Back to the text. Anyone who already filed their 2018 or 2019 return does not qualify to use this tool. So if you've already filed your tax returns, that's not what this tool is for. So you might be in a situation where you're saying, hey, like I filed my tax return, but I haven't received the payment. Maybe I should use the tool. It's not really designed for that. If you filed the tax return, then and you use this tool, you could confuse the IRS. It might actually delay the payments. So if you file the tax return, then you want to basically check up on the payments and not use the tool to try to give them more information for it. Typically, back to the text. The non-filer tool will remain available through the summer and fall, though many eligible people without a filing obligation have already received an economic impact payment. The IRS urges every other eligible non-filer to register soon to quickly receive their payment. Anyone who registers by October 15th will receive their payment by the end of the year. To help reach these non-filers, over the next few months, the IRS will be conducting an extensive outreach and education effort for partner groups who serve homeless individuals, underserved communities, limited English households, and others. As part of this effort, the agency has created an economic impact payment partner page. There's a link to that here. And materials are available in multiple languages. The IRS cautions that some people who need to file a tax return have been mistakenly using the non-filers tool to try to get the economic impact payment. So in other words, if you haven't filed the tax return 2019, then they're going to rely on 2018. But what if you haven't filed 2018? Then you're going to think, well, maybe I should use the non-filer tool because then they can just give me the payment. But the non-filer tool is designed for people who aren't required to file the tax return. So in other words, you would have had to have your income needs to be low enough to the point where you weren't required to file the tax return. If, on the other hand, you didn't file the tax return, but were required to because your income is over the limit, you would need to require the tax return, you just haven't done it, then you'd have to then they want you to file the tax return. This tool isn't designed for that because it's just an information tool. It's not picking up the income information. Is designed for people where they don't need the income information because they don't need to file the tax return. If they need the income information, then and you haven't given it to them by filing the tax return, they want the actual tax return. Back to the text. For more information on the economic impact payment, including answers to frequently asked questions and other resources, visit IRS.gov/coronavirus. There's a link to that here. There'll be a link to this in the description.